Deep in the woods, surrounded by towering trees and the calming sound of water lapping against the shore, there was a cozy little cabin. This wasn't just any cabin, it was the cabin. A place where someone had poured their heart, soul, and years of savings into making it feel like home. For Alex, this was more than just a weekend getaway. It was an escape from the noise of everyday life. The cabin sat right by a quiet lake, far enough away from the city to feel like another world, but close enough that getting groceries or supplies wasn't a hassle. It had everything Alex needed: a comfy living room with big windows overlooking the water, a small kitchen stocked with essentials, and even a deck perfect for morning coffee or evening stargazing. There was something magical about being able to step outside and hear nothing but birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. It was peaceful, private, and exactly what Alex dreamed of when they bought the place. But owning a slice of paradise came with its own set of challenges. The neighborhood was part of a homeowners association, HOA, which meant rules, lots of them. Some were reasonable, like keeping lawns tidy and not parking RVs on the street overnight. Others felt a bit nitpicky, like restrictions on what color curtains you could hang if they were visible from the road. Still, Alex didn't mind too much because most people seemed friendly enough, and everyone generally followed the guidelines without drama. Life at the cabin was good for a while. Weekends were spent relaxing, reading books, fishing off the dock, or hosting small gatherings with friends who appreciated the beauty of the area as much as Alex did. Everything felt picture perfect, or so it seemed. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Alex was lounging on the deck with a cold drink in hand, soaking up the view. The air smelled fresh, and the only sounds were nature doing its thing. Then, out of nowhere, Alex noticed movement near the edge of the property. At first glance, it looked like deer wandering through the woods. But as Alex squinted, they realized it wasn't wildlife, it was people, and these weren't just random hikers passing through. They were clearly heading straight toward the cabin. Curious and slightly confused, Alex stood up to get a better look. Sure enough, 3 adults and a couple of kids were walking around like they owned the place. One guy was carrying a cooler, another was setting up chairs near the dock, and the kids were splashing around in the shallow end of the lake. Alex blinked a few times, trying to process what was happening. These strangers were acting like they belonged here, but Alex hadn't invited anyone over. What made things stranger was that Alex recognized one of the adults. It was Karen, a neighbor known for her loud opinions and knack for stirring up trouble. Karen lived down the road, and though Alex hadn't crossed paths with her often, they'd heard plenty about her. She was the type of person who always had something to say during HOA meetings, whether it was complaining about someone's mailbox color or insisting the speed limit signs needed to be bigger. People joked behind her back, calling her HOA Karen, because she acted like the unofficial sheriff of the neighborhood. If there was ever a problem or something she thought should be a problem, Karen would make sure everyone knew about it. Alex sighed and walked down to meet the group. Trying to stay calm, they approached Karen and asked politely, "Hey, can I help you? Are you looking for something?" Karen turned around, looking surprised for a moment before breaking into a smile. "Oh, hi. We're just enjoying the lake," she said casually, gesturing to her friends and family. "Didn't think you'd mind." "Actually," Alex replied, keeping their tone friendly but firm, "this is my property. I don't recall inviting you or your guests here." Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. "Your property? Really?" "Huh. Well, we thought the whole lakeside was kind of shared space. Everyone uses it." "That's not how it works," Alex explained patiently. "Each lot has its own boundaries, and this land belongs to me. You're welcome to use the designated public areas, but not private property." At this point, Karen's friends started chiming in. "Come on, man, lighten up," one of them said with a laugh. It's just a little fun. No harm done." "No." "Harm?" Alex repeated, feeling irritation creep in. "You're using my dock, sitting on my lawn, and letting your kids play in my water without asking permission. That's called trespassing." The mood shifted quickly. Karen crossed her arms, suddenly defensive. "Fine, whatever. We'll leave. But you might want to think about being less territorial. People around here are used to sharing." With that, Karen gathered her group, muttering under her breath as they packed up their things and left. Alex watched them go, shaking their head. They couldn't believe what had just happened. Not only had Karen brought uninvited guests onto their property, but she also tried to justify it by saying it was normal. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Alex sat back down on the deck, still processing the encounter. Something told them this wouldn't be the last time they'd have to deal with Karen. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a much bigger headache, one that would involve accusations, confrontations, and even a visit from the police. Still, for now, the lake was quiet again, and Alex took a deep breath, trying to let go of the tension. Tomorrow was a new day, and maybe things would settle down. Or maybe not. After the awkward and frustrating encounter with Karen and her guests, Alex decided it was time to take action. They couldn't just sit back and hope this wouldn't happen again. Carolee had no respect for boundaries, and if left unchecked, she'd probably bring more uninvited visitors to the property. Alex wasn't about to let their peaceful retreat turn into some kind of free-for-all hangout spot. The first thing Alex did was head to the local hardware store to pick up no trespassing signs. Big ones, the kind that leave absolutely no room for misinterpretation. They hammered these signs into the ground at key spots around the property line near the driveway, by the path leading to the dock, and even along the edge of the woods where people might wander in. Each sign was bold and clear: private property. Nitrogen monoxide trespassing. It was a simple message, but Alex hoped it would deter anyone who thought they could stroll onto the land without permission. Next, Alex sent an email to Karen directly. They kept it polite but firm, explaining what had happened and making it crystal clear that her guests weren't welcome on their property unless explicitly invited. Alex didn't want to come across as rude or confrontational. They simply wanted to protect their space. The email ended with a friendly note saying they hoped Karen understood and that maybe they could all work together to keep the neighborhood harmonious. At least, that's what Alex thought would happen. Instead, Karen reacted like Alex had declared war. When Karen got the email, she practically exploded. To her, this wasn't just about being told no. This was personal. In Karen's mind, she was the unofficial leader of the neighborhood, the person who kept everyone in line and made sure things ran smoothly. When Alex set boundaries, it felt like a direct challenge to her authority. How dare someone tell her or her friends what they could or couldn't do? Instead of letting it go, Karen went straight into overdrive. She started talking about Alex behind their back, painting them as some sort of tyrant who hated fun and community spirit. At the next HOA meeting, Karen brought it up during the open discussion portion, calling Alex unfriendly and accusing them of ruining the neighborly vibe. She even suggested that Alex's cabin was disrupting the harmony of the entire lakeside area. Of course, not everyone agreed with Karen. Some neighbors shrugged it off, figuring it was none of their business how Alex chose to handle their property. Others, though, nodded along with Karen's complaints, feeding into her narrative that Alex was somehow unreasonable. Before long, whispers spread through the neighborhood, and Alex started noticing subtle changes in how some people treated them. A few neighbors who used to wave hello now avoided eye contact. One couple even canceled plans to borrow Alex's kayak after Karen casually mentioned that Alex was difficult to deal with. Things escalated further when Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She began encouraging her friends and sometimes even strangers to visit the lake, pointing out Alex's cabin as if daring them to test the limits. "Oh, sure, technically it's private property," Karen would say with a smirk, "but who follows those rules? Everyone knows the lake is for sharing." Alex tried to ignore the growing tension, focusing instead on enjoying their time at the cabin. But it wasn't easy. Every time they saw unfamiliar cars parked nearby or heard voices coming from the direction of their property, anxiety crept in. It felt like Karen was deliberately trying to provoke them, pushing boundaries to see how far Alex would go before snapping. One evening, after a particularly stressful day dealing with yet another group of trespassers, Alex sat on the deck nursing a cup of tea. As they stared out at the water, they couldn't help but feel defeated. Why was this happening? All they wanted was to enjoy their little slice of paradise in peace. Was that really too much to ask? Just as Alex was starting to think things couldn't get any worse, there was a knock at the door. Startled, they set down their mug and went to answer it. Standing outside were two police officers, their expression serious but calm. "Hi," one of them said. "Are you Alex?" "Yes, that's me," Alex replied, heart sinking. "What's going on?" The officer hesitated for a moment before explaining. Apparently, someone had called the cops, claiming Alex was harassing residents and violating HOA rules. According to the report, Alex had been aggressive toward neighbors and refused to allow anyone access to the lake. Alex's jaw dropped. Harassment? Refusing access? None of that was true. They hadn't done anything wrong. They were just protecting their property. Who would make such wild accusations? It didn't take long to figure out the answer. As the officers asked questions and listened to Alex's side of the story, it became painfully obvious who was behind the complaint. Karen had gone full throttle, dialing 911 in an attempt to paint Alex as the villain. What she didn't realize, though, was that her plan was about to blow up in her face. As Alex explained the situation to the officers, showing them photos of the trespassers on their property and sharing screenshots of their polite communication. With Karen, the truth started to come out. The officers promised to investigate further, leaving Alex with a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because they finally had a chance to clear their name, but frustration because they knew Karen wasn't going to let this go quietly. Little did Alex know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger battle. And while they had done everything right so far, standing up to someone like Karen wasn't going to be easy. When the police officers arrived at Alex's cabin, it felt like a scene out of a movie. The calm evening had been shattered by that unexpected knock on the door. Two officers stood there, their faces serious but not unkind, asking questions about an accusation neither Alex nor anyone reasonable would have seen coming. Someone, obviously Karen, had called the cops, claiming Alex was harassing neighbors and breaking HOA rules. It was absurd, but also infuriating. How could someone twist the truth so blatantly? Alex took a deep breath and invited the officers inside. They didn't want to seem defensive or upset, even though they were both. Instead, they stayed calm and collected, knowing that facts spoke louder than drama. Sitting down at the kitchen table, Alex began explaining everything from the start, the trespassing incidents, Karen's refusal to respect boundaries, and the polite way they'd handled the situation up until now. To back up their story, Alex pulled out evidence. First, they showed the officers photos captured by the security cameras mounted around the property. These weren't fancy cameras. They were basic ones Alex had installed after buying the cabin to keep an eye on things while away, but the footage told a clear story. There was Karen herself, pointing toward the cabin as if giving directions to her friends. Then came the group of trespassers, casually walking onto private land, setting up chairs near the dock, and letting kids splash around in the water like it was a public park. One clip even showed one of Karen's guests using the outdoor shower a fuss. Detail so brazen it made Alex shake their head in disbelief. Next, Alex handed over screenshots of the email exchange with Karen. The tone was professional and measured throughout. Alex had politely explained the issue, reminded Karen that the property was private, and asked her to ensure her guests stayed off it in the future. There was nothing aggressive or confrontational about it. If anything, Alex had bent over backward. To avoid conflict, the officers listened intently, nodding as they reviewed the materials. "This is helpful," one of them said finally. "We'll need to look into this further, but based on what you've shown us, it seems like you've acted within your rights." Hearing those words brought some relief, but Alex knew the investigation wasn't over yet. Before leaving, the officers mentioned they'd likely speak with Karen too. That thought filled Alex with a mix of dread and curiosity. What would Karen say when confronted with undeniable proof? Would she double down on her lies, or would she admit she'd crossed a line? The next day, news of the police visit spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. In small communities like this, secrets don't stay hidden for long. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, speculating about what had happened. Some sided with Alex, especially those who had grown tired of Karen's antics over the years. Others, swayed by Karen's influence, believed her version of events without question. Tension simmered beneath the surface, turning the once peaceful lakeside community into a battleground of gossip and mistrust. Karen, for her part, was livid. When the officers showed up at her house to ask questions, she launched into a defensive rant. She claimed Alex was being unreasonable and controlling, insisting that the lake should be treated as communal space. But when the officers pressed her for specifics, asking why she hadn't mentioned the initial trespassing incident during her 911 call, Karen faltered. Her excuses grew weaker, her tone more agitated. Then came the moment of truth. The officers asked to see security footage. From Alex's cameras, Karen's face turned pale. Up until that point, she had assumed Alex wouldn't have any concrete evidence. After all, most people in the neighborhood didn't bother with cameras. But Alex had been prepared, and the recordings left no room for doubt. Karen's role in guiding her friends onto private property was undeniable. Worse still, the footage revealed just how casual and entitled her behavior had been, like she genuinely believed rules didn't apply to her. Faced with irrefutable proof, Karen tried to backtrack. She stammered something about misunderstandings and good intentions, but it was too late. The damage was done. The officers gave her a stern warning about making false accusations and advised her to leave Alex alone moving forward. As they walked away, Karen slammed her front door in frustration, muttering under her breath about how unfair the whole situation was. Meanwhile, Alex tried to focus on life at the cabin, though the stress lingered. Every creak of the floorboards or unfamiliar sound outside made them jump, wondering if Karen might try something else. Would she retaliate, start another rumor, or maybe escalate things further? Alex couldn't predict what Karen would do next. But one thing was certain, she wasn't the type to back down easily. Still, there were moments of peace. On quiet mornings, Alex would sit on the deck with a cup of coffee, watching the mist rise off the lake. During these times, they reminded themselves why they'd bought the cabin in the first place, to escape the chaos of the world and find solace in nature. No matter what Karen did, she couldn't take that away from them. As days passed, Alex noticed subtle shifts in the neighborhood dynamics. A few neighbors who had previously avoided them started reaching out, apologizing for believing Karen's side of the story. One elderly couple stopped by with a basket of fresh-baked cookies, thanking Alex for standing up to Karen. "We've all been waiting for someone to do that," the woman said with a wink. "She thinks she runs this place, but we're tired of her nonsense." Even some members of the HOA board reached out privately, acknowledging that Karen's behavior had gone too far this time. While they couldn't officially reprimand her without proper procedures, they promised to keep a closer eye on her actions moving forward. For Alex, these small gestures of support meant a lot. It felt like the tide was slowly turning in their favor, but Alex also knew better than to let their guard down completely. Karen was still out there, nursing her wounded pride and plotting her next move. And as much as Alex wanted to believe the worst was over, they couldn't shake the feeling that this feud was far from finished. The fallout from Karen's false accusations hit the neighborhood like a storm. Word spread quickly. Some people whispered about it over coffee, others debated it during their morning walks, and a few even brought it up at the next HOA meeting. The tension was palpable, dividing the community into two camps: those who supported Alex and believed they were in the right, and those who still clung to Karen's version of events. It was clear that this wasn't just a squabble between two neighbors anymore. It had become a full-blown neighborhood drama. Karen, humiliated by the police visit and the mounting evidence against her, wasn't about to let things slide. If anything, she doubled down on her crusade against Alex. She began rallying support online and offline, determined to paint herself as the victim and Alex as the villain. Her first move? Creating a petition titled "Restore Community Harmony," which called for Alex's removal from the HOA board. The document accused Alex of being hostile, divisive, and disruptive to the neighborhood. She shared the petition widely, posting it in local Facebook groups and slipping printed copies into mailboxes around the area. At first glance, the language seemed reasonable enough, but anyone paying attention could see through the thinly veiled attempt to smear Alex's reputation. Phrases like intimidating behavior and unwillingness to cooperate were vague buzzwords designed to stir emotions rather than present facts. What Karen failed to mention, of course, was her own role in the conflict, or the security footage that proved Alex had done nothing wrong. At first, Karen's efforts gained some traction. A handful of neighbors signed the petition, either because they genuinely believed her story or because they feared crossing her. But not everyone fell for it. Some residents, tired of Karen's constant meddling, decided to push back. One neighbor, a quiet man who rarely spoke up at meetings, publicly posted a comment on the online petition thread, calling out Karen for spreading lies. He recounted how Karen had once tried to report him for having a bird feeder that attracted squirrels, claiming it violated HOA rules. It didn't. His post struck a nerve with others who had endured similar experiences. Soon, more stories surfaced. Another neighbor described how Karen had complained about their dog barking, even though the dog only barked when Karen walked past their house yelling at it. Someone else recalled how she demanded they repaint their shed after noticing a single scratch on the door. These anecdotes painted a picture of someone who thrived on control and conflict, using the HOA as a tool to impose her will on others. Slowly but surely, public opinion began to shift. Despite the growing backlash, Karen refused to give up. She organized an emergency HOA meeting, framing it as a chance for residents to voice their concerns about Alex's behavior. Night of the meeting, the community center buzzed with energy. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a whiteboard stood at the front of the room, ready for notes. As people filed in, conversations filled the air, some heated, others hushed and uncertain. When the meeting began, Karen took charge immediately. With a clipboard in hand and a tone dripping with self-righteousness, She launched into a speech about maintaining order and protecting our community values. She accused Alex of creating division and making life difficult for everyone else. "This isn't just about one person," she declared dramatically. "It's about standing together as a neighborhood." But before Karen could continue, another resident raised their hand. It was an older woman named Linda, known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp wit. "Excuse me," Linda said firmly, cutting Karen off mid-sentence. "I think we need to hear both sides of the story here. From what I've seen, Alex has been nothing but respectful. They put up signs, sent emails, and handled everything professionally. Meanwhile, Karen has been stirring the pot nonstop." Linda's words sparked a wave of agreement from other attendees. One by one, people chimed in, sharing their thoughts. Some defended Alex, praising them for staying calm despite the chaos. Others criticized Karen, pointing out her history of nitpicking and bullying. The room grew louder as tempers flared, turning the meeting into a free-for-all debate. Karen, visibly rattled, tried to regain control. "This isn't about me," she snapped. "It's about Alex refusing to share the lake." "That's not true," a younger man shouted back. "The lake is shared where it's supposed to be shared, in designated areas. You can't just walk onto someone's private property anytime you feel like it." The argument went on for nearly an hour, with Karen growing increasingly defensive. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that her campaign had backfired spectacularly. Instead of uniting the neighborhood against Alex, she had exposed her own flaws and alienated many of her supporters. When the HOA board finally stepped in to wrap things up, they announced that no formal action would be taken against Alex. However, they did issue a reprimand to Karen for her misuse of community resources and encouraged her to focus on fostering positivity rather than conflict. Though the meeting marked a turning point, Karen wasn't done yet. Embarrassed and angry, she vowed revenge. Over the following weeks, she resorted to petty tactics to annoy Alex. She lodged complaints about minor infractions like leaves blowing onto the road from Alex's yard or the color of their outdoor furniture cover. Each time, Alex responded calmly, providing receipts, photos, or explanations proving compliance with HOA rules. It was exhausting, but Alex refused to stoop to Karen's level. To safeguard their peace of mind, Alex took additional steps. They upgraded their security system, adding motion-activated lights and cameras around the perimeter of the property. They also hired a lawyer to draft a formal cease and desist letter, warning Karen against further harassment or attempts to incite trouble. When the letter arrived in Karen's mailbox, she reportedly threw it across the room in frustration. But deep down, she knew she couldn't ignore it. Legal threats carried weight, and Alex was clearly prepared to defend themselves if necessary. As the dust settled, Alex reflected on the ordeal. It had been draining emotionally, mentally, and financially, but it had also taught them valuable lessons. Standing up for oneself wasn't easy, especially when faced with someone as relentless as Karen, but doing so had earned Alex respect from many neighbors who admired their resilience and fairness. More importantly, it reinforced the importance of setting boundaries, not just for personal well-being, but for maintaining harmony in relationships and communities. Life at the cabin slowly returned to normal. On crisp mornings, Alex sat on the deck sipping coffee, watching sunlight dance across the water. The air felt lighter now, free from the weight of constant tension. Sure, Karen was still lurking somewhere in the background, sulking and plotting her next move. But Alex knew they had done everything right, and that gave them strength. For the first time in months, Alex allowed themselves to relax. The battle may not have been completely over, but they had won the war. And as they gazed out at the tranquil lake, they realized something important. Sometimes, fighting for your peace is worth every ounce of effort. The aftermath of the HOA meeting left Karen in a position she hadn't been in for years, isolated and powerless. For someone who thrived on control and manipulation, this was unfamiliar territory, and it didn't sit well with her. She tried to rally a few remaining allies, but most people had grown tired of her antics. Even those who had initially supported her began to distance themselves, realizing they'd rather avoid drama than get dragged into her mess. Karen's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started parking her car conspicuously close to Alex's driveway, as if daring them to complain. She made loud comments during neighborhood walks, muttering things like, "Some people think they're better than everyone else," loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Once, she even left an anonymous note in Alex's mailbox, accusing them of being too uptight and suggesting they should sell the cabin and leave the community altogether, but Alex refused to engage. Every time Karen tried to provoke a reaction, they stayed calm and focused. Instead of responding to her petty jabs, Alex channeled their energy into making the cabin feel even more like home. They planted flowers along the edge of the property, installed a new hammock between two trees near the lake, and spent weekends fixing up the dock. Life at the cabin was peaceful again, and Alex wasn't about to let Karen ruin that. Despite Karen's lingering presence, the neighborhood dynamics continued to shift. More residents openly sided with Alex, sharing stories of how Karen's controlling nature had affected them over the years. One neighbor revealed that Karen had once reported them to the HOA for hosting a small birthday party in their backyard, claiming the noise disturbed her afternoon nap. Another admitted that Karen had complained about their Christmas lights being too bright, despite the fact that other houses had similar decorations. These revelations painted a clearer picture of Karen's character, someone who used rules as weapons to impose her will on others. As these stories circulated, Karen's influence waned further. The HOA board, finally fed up with her constant complaints and divisive behavior, issued a formal reprimand. While they couldn't expel her from the association outright, they warned her that any future violations of conduct policies would result in stricter consequences. This included restrictions on filing frivolous complaints or using shared spaces. For personal vendettas, for someone like Karen, whose identity seemed tied to her role as the self-appointed enforcer of neighborhood rules, this was a major blow. Humiliated and defeated, Karen retreated into relative obscenity. She stopped attending HOA meetings, avoided social gatherings, and kept mostly to herself. Occasionally, neighbors would spot her walking her dog early in the morning or late at night, likely to avoid running into anyone. It was almost as if she had vanished, but not entirely. Her absence was noticeable, and many found themselves relieved by the sudden quiet. For Alex, life returned to its peaceful rhythm. Weekends were spent fishing off the dock, reading books under the shade of tall oak trees, and enjoying meals outdoors while listening to the sounds of nature. Friends and family visited more often now, drawn not only by the beauty of the cabin but also by Alex's resilience and determination to protect it. Word of the feud spread beyond the immediate neighborhood, and some visitors came simply to meet the person who had stood up to HOA. One evening, as Alex sat on the deck watching the sunset, a neighbor walked over with a bottle of wine. It was Linda, the outspoken woman who had defended Alex during the heated HOA meeting. "Thought you could use this," she said with a warm smile, handing over the bottle. "You've earned it." Alex laughed, thanking her. They chatted for a while, talking about everything from gardening tips to upcoming community events. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Alex realized how much the neighborhood had changed, not just because of the conflict with Karen, but because of the unity it had sparked among others. People who had previously kept to themselves were now connecting, forming friendships and working together to improve the community. In a strange way, Karen's downfall had brought everyone closer. Of course, Alex knew that no victory comes without scars. The months of stress and tension had taken a toll, both emotionally and financially. Hiring a lawyer, upgrading security systems, and dealing with endless accusations had been exhausting. But through it all, Alex had learned something invaluable. Standing up for yourself isn't just about protecting your rights, it's about preserving your peace of mind. And sometimes, doing so inspires others to do the same. Over time, Alex noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. New signs appeared around communal areas, clearly marking public versus private spaces. A group of residents formed a committee to organize regular cleanup days, ensuring the lake and surrounding woods remained pristine. Others volunteered to mentor first-time homeowners, helping them navigate HOA rules without feeling intimidated. Slowly but surely, the community transformed into a place where kindness and cooperation outweighed conflict. As seasons changed and leaves turned golden, Alex reflected on the journey they'd been through. The cabin, once a source of contention, had become a symbol of strength and perseverance. It reminded them that challenges, no matter how daunting, can be overcome with patience and resolve. And while Karen still lived down the road, her shadow no longer loomed large. She was merely a distant figure, a reminder of lessons learned and battles won. On a crisp autumn morning, Alex stood on the dock, breathing in the fresh air. The lake was calm, its surface reflecting the vibrant colors of fall foliage. For the first time in what felt like forever, they felt truly at ease. The cabin wasn't just a retreat anymore, it was a testament to resilience, a place where boundaries were respected and peace had been reclaimed. And as Alex cast a fishing line into the water, they smiled, knowing they had earned every moment of tranquility. After all, sometimes the hardest fights lead to the sweetest victories.